Chapter 1. The Birth of a Leader. Once upon a time, in a small, serene town called Porbandar, on the western coast of India, a baby was born. The date was October 2nd, 1869. The world was quiet, as if it knew that something extraordinary had just begun. This child, this tiny, fragile baby, was named Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. But one day, the world would know him by a simpler name, a name that would echo through the halls of history: Gandhi. From the very beginning, Mohandas was different. He wasn't like the other children, noisy, running around, and always getting into trouble. No. Mohandas was quiet, almost too quiet. He was thoughtful, his big brown eyes always observing, always watching, as if he was trying to understand something much deeper, something that others couldn't see. He was curious about the world around him. Even as a young boy, he would often sit for hours, just watching the birds, the waves crashing on the shore, the people in the market, going about their lives. He was fascinated by everything, by the colors, the sounds, the smells. But more than anything, he was fascinated by people. He would ask questions, endless questions, about why people did what they did, why some were kind and others were cruel, why some had so much and others had so little. But there was something else that captured young Mohandas's heart, something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. It was the stories his mother told him. She would sit with him, her voice gentle and warm, telling him tales of truth and courage, of great heroes who stood up for what was right, even when it was difficult, even when it meant standing alone. One story, in particular, touched Mohandas deeply. It was the story of King Harishchandra, a king who was known for his unwavering commitment to truth. King Harishchandra was tested in every way. He lost his kingdom, his wealth, his family, but he never wavered. He held on to the truth, no matter the cost. In the end, his truthfulness brought him back everything he had lost, and more. This story stirred something deep inside young Mohandas. He would lie awake at night, thinking about the king, wondering what it would be like to live such a life. Could he, a small boy from Porbandar, live by such high principles? Could he always speak the truth, even when it was hard, even when it might bring him trouble? As Mohandas grew older, these thoughts stayed with him. He wasn't just a boy anymore. He was becoming a young man. And with that came the responsibilities and expectations of his family. His father, Karamchand Gandhi, was a respected man in Porbandar. He was the Diwan, the chief minister of the town. It was a position of great honor, and it came with great expectations. Mohandas was expected to follow in his father's footsteps, to study hard, to become a lawyer, to take on the mantle of leadership one day. But Mohandas wasn't interested in power or politics. No, he was more interested in understanding the world, in finding the truth, in living a life that mattered. Still, he was a dutiful son. He knew his father's wishes, and he respected them. So, he studied. He worked hard. But always, in the back of his mind, was that question: what is my purpose? What am I meant to do? Life in Porbandar was simple, but it was not without its challenges. The town was a melting pot of different cultures and religions. Hindus, Muslims, Jains, and others lived side by side. There was peace, but there was also tension, a quiet undercurrent of mistrust and misunderstanding. Mohandas saw this, and it troubled him. He wondered, why can't people live together in harmony? Why do differences have to divide us? These thoughts, these questions, continued to swirl in his mind. They were like seeds that were slowly growing, waiting for the right moment to burst forth. And as he grew, so did his understanding of the world. He began to see the injustices around him, the inequality, the suffering of the poor, the cruelty of the powerful. But Mohandas was still young, and his journey was just beginning. Little did he know that the path he was about to take would be filled with challenges, with hardships, but also with great moments of triumph. He didn't know that he would one day lead a nation, not with weapons or force, but with something far more powerful: the power of truth and the power of non-violence. His childhood in Porbandar, though quiet and simple, was the foundation of everything he would become. It was here, in this small town, that the seeds of his greatness were planted. It was here that he learned the importance of truth, the value of compassion, and the strength that comes from standing up for what is right. As Mohandas grew, these lessons stayed with him, guiding him, shaping him, preparing him for the journey ahead. A journey that would take him far from Porbandar, to places he could never have imagined, to challenges that would test him in ways he could never have foreseen. But for now, Mohandas was just a boy with big dreams and a heart full of questions. He didn't know where life would take him, but he was ready to follow the path of truth, wherever it might lead. And so, the story of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, the man who would become the father of a nation, begins. It is a story of courage, of sacrifice, of unwavering commitment to what is right. It is a story that will inspire generations and remind us all that one person, armed with truth and love, can indeed change the world. Chapter 2: A Journey to London. As Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi grew older, life presented him with a choice that would change the course of his life forever. His family, especially his mother and father, had great hopes for him. They wanted him to become a lawyer, to study in London, a city far, far away from the warm, familiar embrace of India. It was a daunting idea, to leave everything he knew behind, to journey to a place so different, so foreign. But Mohandas knew, deep down, that this was an opportunity. It was a chance to learn, to grow, to see the world beyond the shores of Porbandar. The decision was not easy. Mohandas was a young man, shy, and deeply attached to his family, especially his mother. The thought of leaving her brought a knot to his stomach, but he also knew that to truly understand the world, to become the person he was meant to be, he had to take this leap. And so, with a heavy heart, but with determination in his eyes, Mohandas agreed. In 1888, at the age of 18, Mohandas boarded a ship bound for England. The journey was long, and the ship rocked gently over the waves as it sailed through the vast ocean. Mohandas stood on the deck, watching as the coastline of India slowly disappeared from view, replaced by the endless expanse of blue. The sea was calm, but inside Mohandas, a storm of emotions brewed. He missed his family, his friends, the vibrant colors and sounds of his homeland. He felt alone, so far from everything he knew. But Mohandas was determined. He knew this was his chance to learn, to grow, to become something more. He spent hours reading books, practicing English, and preparing himself for the life that awaited him in London. He was determined to succeed, not just for himself, but for his family, who had placed so much hope and trust in him. When Mohandas finally arrived in London, he was struck by how different everything was. The city was vast, bustling, with people rushing everywhere. The buildings were tall and made of stone, the skies often gray, and the air crisp and cool, so different from the warmth of India. Mohandas felt out of place, a stranger in a strange land. The people around him were different too. Their clothes, their language, their manners, everything was new and unfamiliar. But Mohandas knew he had a mission. He had come to London to study law, to learn the ways of the British legal system. He enrolled in the Inner Temple, one of the 4 Inns of Court in London, where he would study to become a barrister. The lectures were challenging, the professors strict, but Mohandas worked hard. He spent long hours in the library, poring over thick books filled with legal jargon. He attended classes diligently, took notes, and tried his best to understand the complex material. Yet, even as he focused on his studies, something inside him kept whispering, "Remember who you are." It was a quiet voice, but persistent. Mohandas knew that he was far from home, but he also knew that he could not forget where he came from, or who he was. He was an Indian, a son of Porbandar, a man of simple values and deep beliefs. And so, even as he adapted to the British way of life, he held on to his roots. Life in London was not easy. Mohandas was a vegetarian, a practice deeply rooted in his upbringing. But in London, finding vegetarian food was difficult. He often found himself at odds with the British diet, which heavily featured meat. But Mohandas was determined to stay true to his beliefs. He searched for vegetarian restaurants, and even began cooking his own meals. It was a small act of resistance, but for Mohandas, it was important. It was a way of staying connected to his culture, his values, his identity. Despite the challenges, Mohandas began to adapt to life in London. He learned to dress like the British, wearing a suit and tie, something so different from the simple clothes he wore in India. He learned to speak like the British, practicing his English until his accent became almost indistinguishable from those around him. But even as he tried to fit in, he never lost sight of who he was. He kept a small statue of his favorite deity, Lord Krishna, by his bedside, a reminder of home, a reminder of his faith. As the months passed, Mohandas began to see the world with new eyes. He visited museums, art galleries, and theaters. He read the works of great philosophers and thinkers, learning about ideas that were both familiar and new. He engaged in discussions with his classmates, debating politics, ethics, and law. He was expanding his mind. But something else was happening too. Mohandas was beginning to see the world not just as a student, but as a man with a purpose. One day, as he was walking through the streets of London, he came across a small bookstore. Inside, he found a book that would change his life. The Bhagavad Gita. It was a sacred Hindu text, one that he had heard of but never read. Mohandas bought the book and began to read it that very night. As he turned the pages, he felt a deep connection to the words, a connection that went beyond the physical world. The teachings of the Gita resonated with him. Its message of duty, righteousness, and non-attachment touched something deep within his soul. From that day on, the Bhagavad Gita became a guiding light in Mohandas's life. It was more than just a book. It was a source of wisdom, a source of strength. The Gita taught him that true power came not from wealth or status, but from inner peace, from living a life of truth and non-violence. These teachings would stay with him, guiding him through the many challenges that lay ahead. As the end of his studies in London drew near, Mohandas began to think about his future. He had come to London to become a lawyer, to gain the knowledge and skills he needed to succeed. But he knew, deep down, that his journey was far from over. He had learned much, but there was still so much more to understand. He had seen the world from a new perspective, but now it was time to return home, to use what he had learned to make a difference. In 1891, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi returned to India, a newly minted barrister. But he was not the same person who had left Porbandar 3 years earlier. London had changed him. It had opened his eyes to the world, to the complexities of life, to the importance of staying true to one's principles. As he stepped off the ship and felt the warm Indian sun on his face, he knew that his journey was just beginning. He had taken his first steps on the path that would lead him to greatness, a path that would take him through trials and tribulations, through moments of doubt and despair, but also through moments of triumph and joy. The boy from Porbandar was now a man with a purpose, a man with a mission. The journey had begun, and there was no turning back. Chapter 3: The Awakening in South Africa. After completing his studies in London, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi returned to India. He was now a lawyer, ready to take on the world. But as he began his practice in India, he struggled to find his place. The law was complex, and the British rule made everything more difficult for Indian lawyers like Gandhi. He felt lost, unsure of where his path would lead. Then, an opportunity came that would change his life forever. A wealthy Indian merchant in South Africa needed legal help, and he offered Gandhi a job. It was a chance for Gandhi to prove himself, to use his skills and knowledge in a new country. So, in 1893, Gandhi packed his bags and set sail for South Africa, not knowing that this journey would awaken something deep within him, something that would define the rest of his life. When Gandhi arrived in South Africa, he was struck by the beauty of the land. The rolling hills, the bright blue sky, the vibrant communities of Indians who had settled there. It all seemed so full of promise. But beneath the surface, there was a dark reality, one that Gandhi would soon encounter in the most painful way. One cold, dark night, Gandhi was traveling by train to Pretoria, the capital of South Africa. He had bought a first-class ticket. He was dressed in his finest clothes, and he felt proud, confident in his new role as a lawyer. But as the train rolled through the night, something happened that Gandhi would never forget. A white man, noticing Gandhi's dark skin, demanded that he leave the first-class compartment. "You don't belong here," the man shouted. Gandhi, confused and shocked, showed his ticket. "I have every right to be here," he replied. But the man would not listen. He called for the train conductor, who, without hesitation, ordered Gandhi to move to the third-class compartment, a place reserved for non-whites. Gandhi refused. He stood his ground, but the response was swift and brutal. The conductor and a few other men grabbed him and threw him off the train. His belongings scattered. His dignity crushed. Gandhi was left standing alone on the cold, dark platform, trembling with anger and deep, deep hurt. How could this happen? How could a man be treated this way, just because of the color of his skin? That night, as Gandhi sat alone on the platform, shivering in the cold, something inside him began to change. The hurt he felt was like a fire, burning deep within his soul. But instead of letting it consume him with anger or hate, Gandhi found something else, something stronger. He found a new strength, a new purpose. He realized that he could not let this injustice stand, not just for himself, but for all the Indians living in South Africa who faced discrimination and humiliation every day. But Gandhi also knew that fighting injustice with violence would only lead to more pain, more suffering. He had seen too much of that in the world already. He thought back to the lessons he had learned as a child, the stories his mother told him, the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. And then it came to him, clear and powerful, the path he must follow. He would fight, not with fists or weapons, but with the truth. This was the beginning of his journey towards non-violence, or ahimsa. Gandhi knew that ahimsa was not just the absence of violence. It was much more than that. It was the force of love, of compassion, of understanding. It was the strength to face hatred without returning it. It was the courage to stand up for what was right without causing harm to others. This, Gandhi believed, was the only way to truly overcome injustice. With this newfound purpose, Gandhi began to organize the Indian community in South Africa. He spoke at meetings, wrote articles, and encouraged people to stand up for their rights. But he always reminded them that their fight must be peaceful. "We will not stoop to their level," he would say. "We will win, but we will do it with truth and with love." At first, people were skeptical. How could they possibly win without fighting back, without using force? But Gandhi was determined. He led by example, refusing to react with anger, even when faced with violence and abuse. Slowly, people began to see that there was power in his approach. They began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could win this fight without shedding a single drop of blood. One of the first major challenges Gandhi faced was the South African government's decision to impose new laws that targeted the Indian community. These laws required all Indians to carry special passes. They were fingerprinted like criminals, and they were treated as second-class citizens. Gandhi knew that these laws were unjust, and he knew that they had to be challenged. He organized a mass protest, the first of many in what would become known as the Satyagraha movement. Satyagraha means the force of truth, and for Gandhi, it was the perfect name for his nonviolent resistance. The protesters marched peacefully. They refused to carry the passes. They filled the jails rather than submit to the unjust laws. The government was caught off guard. They didn't know how to respond to this new kind of protest, one that was powerful, yet peaceful. The protests continued for years, and Gandhi himself was arrested many times. But each time, he emerged stronger, more determined. The Indian community began to unite like never before. And even some of the white South Africans started to see the injustice of the laws. The world began to take notice of this small man with a big heart who was changing the course of history without ever raising a fist. After years of struggle, the South African government finally relented. The unjust laws were repealed, and the Indian community won a significant victory. But for Gandhi, this was only the beginning. The success of Satyagraha in South Africa showed him that ahimsa was not just a dream. It was a real powerful force that could change the world. Gandhi returned to India in 1915, a changed man. He was no longer just Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, the shy lawyer from Porbandar. He was now a leader, a visionary, a man who had discovered a new way to fight injustice. And he knew that his work was far from over. India, his beloved homeland, was still under British rule. And Gandhi knew that the fight for freedom would require everything he had learned, everything he believed in. But he was ready. He had found his path, and nothing would turn him away from it. The journey of Satyagraha had begun, and it would lead Gandhi to become one of the greatest leaders the world has ever known. The boy who had once been thrown off a train had now become a beacon of hope, a symbol of peace, and a champion of truth. Chapter 4: The Power of Nonviolence. Gandhi had discovered something powerful in South Africa, something that would change not just his life, but the lives of millions. It was the idea of nonviolence. A way to fight injustice without anger, without hate, and without causing harm to anyone. But this idea was new. and not everyone understood it at first. How could anyone fight without weapons, without raising a hand in anger? It seemed impossible. Yet Gandhi believed it was the only way. When Gandhi began to organize the Indian community in South Africa, his message was clear. No more violence, no more hate, only peaceful protests. The community was inspired by his words, but also confused. How could they defend themselves without fighting back? How could they stand up to the powerful without using force? Gandhi explained that nonviolence, or ahimsa, was not about being weak. It was about being strong, stronger than any weapon, stronger than any army. Ahimsa meant facing injustice with courage, with the power of truth, and with love in your heart. It meant refusing to hate your enemy, even when they hurt you. It meant standing firm in your beliefs, without giving in to anger or fear. People were amazed. They had never heard anything like this before. How could anyone have the strength to fight without anger, without revenge? But as Gandhi began to lead by example, people saw that it was possible. They saw that one man, armed only with truth and love, could make a difference. One of the first big tests of nonviolence came when the South African government introduced new laws that discriminated against Indians. These laws required all Indians to register with the authorities, be fingerprinted like criminals, and carry special passes at all times. It was an insult to their dignity, a clear sign that they were seen as second-class citizens. Gandhi knew that these laws were wrong, and he knew that they had to be challenged. But he also knew that the challenge had to be peaceful. So, he organized a protest, a satyagraha, which means the force of truth. The plan was simple and powerful. They would refuse to register. They would refuse to carry the passes. And they would accept the consequences, even if it meant going to jail. At first, the government didn't take the protest seriously. They thought it would fail. But Gandhi and his followers were determined. They marched through the streets, chanting peacefully, holding signs that spoke of justice and equality. The police were called in to stop them, but the protesters didn't fight back. They simply sat down, peacefully, and refused to move. Many were arrested, including Gandhi. But the more people were thrown in jail, the more others joined the movement. It was as if the power of truth and love was spreading, growing stronger with each passing day. The government was shocked. They had never seen anything like this before. As the protests continued, something remarkable began to happen. People in South Africa and around the world started to take notice. They saw the bravery of the protesters, their calm, peaceful demeanor, even in the face of violence. They saw the power of nonviolence in action, and they were moved. The Indian community in South Africa began to win small victories. The government started to back down, realizing that they could not defeat a movement that was based on truth and justice. One of the most powerful moments of the Satyagraha came when Gandhi led a march to burn the registration passes. These passes were a symbol of oppression, of the way Indians were being treated as less than human. Gandhi and his followers gathered in a public square, and one by one they threw the passes into a large fire. The flames roared, and with them the hopes of a government that relied on fear to control the people. The burning of the passes was a powerful act of defiance, but it was done peacefully. There was no violence, no anger, only a quiet determination to stand up for what was right. And it worked. The government was forced to negotiate, and eventually, the most oppressive parts of the law were repealed. Gandhi's success in South Africa showed the world that nonviolence was not just a dream. It was a powerful tool for change. People began to see that one person, with truth and love, could indeed make a difference. Gandhi's name began to spread, far and wide. He was no longer just a lawyer from India. He was a leader, a symbol of hope for people all over the world who were fighting against injustice. But Gandhi knew that the journey was far from over. He knew that the power of nonviolence had to be tested in even greater challenges. And he knew that his next battle would be in his homeland, India. India was still under British rule, and the people were suffering. Gandhi knew that the fight for independence would be long and difficult, but he also knew that it had to be done with ahimsa, with non-violence. When Gandhi returned to India in 1915, he was greeted as a hero. People had heard of his work in South Africa. They had heard of the power of nonviolence, and they were eager to learn from him. But Gandhi was not interested in being a hero. He was interested in change, real, lasting change. And he knew that change would not come from one person alone. It would come from the people, from millions of Indians who were ready to stand up for their rights. Gandhi began to travel across India, speaking to the people, listening to their stories, learning about their struggles. He spoke about non-violence, about the power of truth, about the need for unity. He encouraged people to stand up for their rights, but to do so peacefully. "We will not fight the British with violence," he said. "We will fight them with our hearts, with our souls, with our love for this land." At first, many people were skeptical. How could they possibly win against the mighty British Empire without using force? But Gandhi's words touched something deep inside them. They saw the wisdom in his teachings. They saw the power of nonviolence. And they began to believe. Slowly but surely, the movement for Indian independence began to grow. It was not easy, and there were many challenges along the way. But Gandhi remained steadfast. He believed in the power of ahimsa, and he believed in the power of the people. Together, they would prove that love, not hate, was the strongest force in the world. As Gandhi's name spread across India, it also spread across the world. People began to see that nonviolence was not just a strategy. It was a way of life. It was a way of facing the world with courage, with truth, and with compassion. And through his work, Gandhi showed the world that one man, with the power of nonviolence, could indeed change the course of history. Chapter 5. Return to India. After spending years in South Africa, where he had fought tirelessly for the rights of the Indian community, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi returned to India in 1915. The ship that brought him back sailed through the vast ocean, carrying not just a man, but a vision of freedom, justice, and equality. But as Gandhi set foot on the soil of his homeland, his heart was heavy. India, his beloved country, was in chains, suffering under the weight of British rule. The land that once flourished with vibrant culture and rich traditions was now a place of deep sorrow. The people were poor, hungry, and oppressed. Everywhere Gandhi looked, he saw the effects of British exploitation: farmers losing their lands, workers toiling for meager wages, and families struggling to survive. The British had taken control of everything: the economy, the government, even the very spirit of the people. Gandhi knew he had to do something. But what? How could one man fight against such a powerful empire? Gandhi didn't rush into action. He knew that before he could lead his people, he had to understand their struggles, their pain, their hopes. So he began a journey, one that would take him across the length and breadth of India. He traveled to villages and towns, from the bustling cities to the most remote corners of the country. He spoke to farmers, workers, and villagers, listening to their stories, hearing their cries for help. In each place, Gandhi saw the same story repeated. The British had imposed heavy taxes on the farmers, forcing them to grow cash crops like indigo and cotton instead of food. As a result, the farmers couldn't feed their families. They were trapped in a cycle of debt and poverty. The workers in the factories and mills were treated like machines, working long hours for little pay, with no rights and no hope. The common people, the backbone of the country, were being crushed under the weight of British rule. As Gandhi listened to these stories, his heart ached for his people, but he also felt something else, a growing sense of determination. He knew that India could not continue like this. The people needed to rise up, to fight for their rights, to demand their freedom. But Gandhi also knew that this fight could not be won with violence. He had seen too much violence in the world, and he knew that it only led to more suffering. India's fight for freedom had to be different. It had to be rooted in truth and in nonviolence. Slowly, an idea began to take shape in Gandhi's mind. He realized that India could be free, but only if its people stood together, united in their struggle. They had to fight not just against the British, but against the fear and division that kept them apart. Gandhi saw that the power of the British lay not just in their guns and soldiers, but in the way they divided the people, by religion, by caste, by region. The British had used these divisions to weaken India, to control its people. But Gandhi believed that if the people could overcome these divisions, if they could see themselves as one, they could achieve anything. Gandhi's vision for India was one where people of all religions, all castes, all regions stood together, as brothers and sisters. He believed in the power of the people, in their ability to bring about change through peaceful means. But he knew that this would not be easy. The people had been under British rule for so long that they had forgotten what it meant to be free. They had lost their sense of pride, their sense of self-worth. Gandhi's first task was to awaken this spirit, to remind the people of who they were. He started with simple acts of defiance, acts that showed the people they could resist the British without resorting to violence. He encouraged people to boycott British goods, to stop buying British clothes, and instead to spin their own cloth using the charkha, a traditional spinning wheel. This act, simple as it was, became a symbol of self-reliance, of independence. People began to see that they didn't need to depend on the British, that they could create their own future. Gandhi also spoke out against the injustices in Indian society, the discrimination based on caste and religion. He called for the end of untouchability, the cruel practice that condemned millions of people to a life of poverty and humiliation simply because of the caste they were born into. Gandhi believed that for India to be truly free, all its people had to be free. Free from oppression, free from discrimination, free from fear. As Gandhi traveled from village to village, more and more people began to follow him. They saw in him a leader who understood their pain, who shared their dreams. Gandhi didn't just talk about nonviolence. He lived it. He showed the people that nonviolence was not a sign of weakness, but of great strength. It took more courage to stand up to your oppressor without raising a hand than to fight back with violence. But Gandhi's ideas were not accepted by everyone. Some leaders believed that the only way to achieve freedom was through armed rebellion. They couldn't understand how nonviolence could possibly work against the might of the British Empire. But Gandhi stood firm. He knew that violence would only bring more suffering, that it would tear the country apart rather than unite it. He believed that the people of India had the power to change their future, not through force, but through their collective will. The journey was long and difficult. There were moments of doubt, moments of despair. But Gandhi never lost faith in his pupil. He knew that deep within them was a strength that could not be defeated, a strength that came from truth, from love, from the desire for justice. He knew that if they could tap into that strength, nothing could stop them. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. More and more people joined the movement for independence, adopting Gandhi's principles of nonviolence and truth. The British, who had once seemed invincible, began to feel the pressure. They realized that they could not control a people who were no longer afraid, a people who were united in their desire for freedom. Gandhi's return to India had sparked a revolution, not just against the British, but within the hearts of the people. He had shown them that they had the power to change their world, that they could stand up to oppression without resorting to violence. He had given them hope, and with that hope came the strength to fight on. As Gandhi continued his journey across India, he knew that the battle was far from over. But he also knew that the seeds of change had been planted. India was waking up. Its people were finding their voice. And the dream of freedom was no longer just a dream. It was becoming a reality, one that would be achieved through the power of nonviolence, through the strength of unity, and through the unwavering belief in the truth. The road ahead was still long, and there would be many challenges to come. But Gandhi was ready. He had found his purpose, his mission. He would lead his people, not with guns or swords, but with the power of ahimsa, the power of nonviolence. And with that power, he believed, India would one day be free. Chapter 6. The Salt March. One day, as Gandhi sat quietly, in his ashram, thinking deeply about the struggle for India's freedom, an idea began to take shape in his mind. A simple yet powerful idea. The British had imposed a tax on salt, a tax that affected every single person in India, rich or poor. Salt was not a luxury. It was a necessity. Everyone needed it to survive. Yet, the British had made it illegal for Indians to collect or make their own salt. They were forced to buy it from the British, who controlled the salt trade. Gandhi knew that this was more than just an unfair tax. It was a symbol of the British oppression that had gripped India for so long. And he realized this could be the spark that would ignite the fire of resistance across the country. This simple substance, salt, could unite the people in a common cause. It was time to act. So, on March 12, 1930, Gandhi set out from his ashram on a journey that would become one of the most famous acts of civil disobedience in history. He decided to march, not just a few miles, but 240 miles, from his home in Sabarmati to the coastal village of Dandi, where he would make salt from the sea. This march, Gandhi knew, would be a direct challenge to British rule. It was a way to show the world that India would not be bowed, that its people would not be broken. As Gandhi began his march, he was not alone. A small group of devoted followers walked with him, their hearts filled with hope and determination. They walked through villages and towns, through heat and dust, step by step, mile by mile. But as they walked, something incredible happened. Word of the march spread like wildfire. People began to join them, first in small groups, then in large numbers. Men, women, young and old, from all walks of life. They came to walk with Gandhi. They came to stand with him in his fight for freedom. The march grew longer, and the days hotter, but the spirit of the people never wavered. They walked with their heads held high, knowing that they were part of something much bigger than themselves. They were not just marching to the sea. They were marching for their dignity, their rights, and their freedom. As they walked, Gandhi spoke to the crowds that gathered along the way. His words were simple, yet they stirred something deep within the hearts of the people. "We will not use violence," he said. "We will not raise a hand against our oppressors, but we will not bow down. We will take what is ours, with truth in our hearts and peace in our souls." The British government watched with growing concern. They knew that Gandhi was no ordinary man, and this was no ordinary protest. They saw the people rising, not with weapons, but with something much more powerful: unity and resolve. But the British did not know how to respond. They were used to dealing with violence, with force. But how could they fight against a movement that refused to use violence? On April 5th, after 24 days of marching, Gandhi and his followers reached the coastal village of Dandi. The air was thick with anticipation. The world was watching, holding its breath. Early the next morning, Gandhi walked down to the shore, his small, frail figure standing tall against the vast expanse of the sea. He bent down, picked up a handful of salty mud, and then he made salt. It was a simple act, yet it was an act that shook the foundations of British rule. With that handful of salt, Gandhi had defied the might of the British Empire. And it wasn't just him. Across India, people began to make their own salt, in defiance of the law. It was as if the entire nation had risen up, with salt in one hand and the truth in the other. The British were furious. They arrested thousands of people, including Gandhi himself. But it was too late. The Salt March had already become a symbol of India's fight for freedom, a symbol that the world could not ignore. News of the Salt March spread across the globe. People in other countries saw what was happening in India, and they were inspired. They saw a people standing up for their rights, not with violence, but with peace. They saw the power of non-violence in action, and they were moved. Leaders from around the world, from Martin Luther King Jr. in America to Nelson Mandela in South Africa, would later draw inspiration from Gandhi's example. The British government realized that the Salt March was not just about salt. It was about the people's will to be free. They could not crush this movement with force. They began to see that their days in India were numbered, that the tide was turning. But Gandhi did not celebrate. Not yet. He knew that the road to freedom was still long and filled with challenges. But he also knew that the Salt March had awakened something in the people, a sense of pride, a sense of power, and a belief that they could and would achieve their independence. Even as Gandhi sat in prison, his spirit remained unbroken. He knew that he had lit a flame that would not be easily extinguished. The British could jail him. They could arrest the protesters, but they could not stop the tide of change that was sweeping across India. The Salt March had shown the world that non-violence was not a weakness, but a strength. It was a force that could move mountains, that could bring an empire to its knees. As Gandhi looks back on the Salt March, he saw it for what it was. A turning point in India's struggle for freedom. It had united the people in a way that nothing else had. It had shown them that they could stand up to injustice without resorting to violence. And it had proven that even the smallest act, when done with courage and conviction, could change the course of history. The Salt March was more than just a protest. It was a message to the world. A message that freedom, justice, and dignity were not just the rights of a few, but the rights of all people, everywhere. And that these rights could be won, not with guns or bombs, but with truth, with love, and with non-violence. As Gandhi continued his fight for India's independence, he carried with him the lessons of the Salt March. He knew that the path to freedom would be difficult, that there would be more challenges, more sacrifices. But he also knew that the spirit of the people had been awakened, and that spirit, once awakened, could not be defeated. And so, the march toward freedom continued, step by step, day by day, until the dream of independence was finally realized. But the story of the Salt March and the lessons it taught would live on, inspiring generations to come, showing the world that the power of nonviolence is stronger than any empire, and that the truth, once set free, can never be silenced. Remember, you're listening to WooEnglish. If you're enjoying these captivating stories, don't forget to share, like, and leave a comment. It really helps us bring you more great content. Now, let's dive into Chapter 7. The Quit India Movement. Chapter 7. The Quit India Movement. As the years passed and the struggle for India's independence grew stronger, Gandhi became more determined than ever. The British had ruled India for over a century, and their grip on the country was tight. But Gandhi believed that freedom was within reach. The people of India had fought long and hard. They had faced arrests, beatings, and even death. But their spirit was unbroken. They were ready for the final push, the last great struggle to win their freedom. It was 1942, and the world was in the midst of World War II. The British were fighting on many fronts, and India was being dragged into the conflict without any say in the matter. Gandhi saw this as the perfect moment to demand India's independence. He knew that the British were weakened, distracted by the war. It was time to make a bold move, to demand that the British leave India once and for all. On August 8, 1942, in the city of Bombay, now Mumbai, Gandhi gave a speech that would echo across the country and around the world. He launched the Quit India movement with a simple, powerful slogan, "Do or die." Gandhi's message was clear. India must be free, and the British must leave. Now. Gandhi's speech was electrifying. He called on the people of India to rise up, to demand their freedom, but to do so peacefully. He urged them to continue the path of nonviolence, no matter what. "We shall either free India," Gandhi declared, "or die in the attempt. We shall not live to see the perpetuation of our slavery." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across India, people rallied to Gandhi's call. The Quit India movement spread like wildfire, reaching every corner of the country. Workers went on strike. Students left their schools. Shopkeepers closed their stores. Everywhere, the people of India were demanding one thing: freedom. But the British were not ready to give up their hold on India. They responded with force, swift and brutal. Within hours of Gandhi's speech, he and many other leaders of the Indian National Congress were arrested. The British hoped that by removing the leaders, they could crush the movement. But they were wrong, terribly wrong. The arrests only fueled the fire of resistance. The people of India were no longer afraid. They had endured too much, suffered too long. Now, they were ready to take their destiny into their own hands. Despite the absence of their leaders, they continued to protest, peacefully, but with great courage. They organized marches, held meetings, and spread Gandhi's message far and wide. In towns and villages across India, ordinary people became the new leaders of the movement. Farmers, workers, students, they all took up the cause. They knew that the stakes were high, but they also knew that this was their moment. The British could arrest Gandhi, but they could not arrest the spirit of freedom that had taken hold of the nation. The British authorities tried to crush the movement with all their might. They imposed curfews, banned public meetings, and used violence to break up protests. But the people of India stood firm. They faced the batons and bullets with the same courage that Gandhi had taught them, refusing to retaliate. refusing to give up. The world watched in awe as the people of India continued their peaceful struggle. The Quit India movement was not just a political protest. It was a moral battle. It showed the world that a nation's spirit could not be broken by force, that the desire for freedom was stronger than any empire. Despite the harsh repression, the Quit India movement persisted. The British were caught in a dilemma. They could not control the masses, but they could not afford to leave India, especially during the war. The movement had thrown the British government into disarray, and it was becoming clear that the end of British rule was near. As Gandhi sat in prison, he remained a beacon of hope for the people. Even behind bars, his message continued to inspire millions. He fasted, prayed, and wrote letters, urging the people to stay the course, to remain nonviolent, to keep the faith. Gandhi knew that the road to freedom was difficult, but he also knew that victory was within reach. The Quit India movement was a turning point in India's struggle for independence. It marked the moment when the people of India as a whole took ownership of their fight for freedom. It was no longer just a struggle led by a few leaders. It was a mass movement, driven by the will of the people. The British soon realized that they could no longer hold on to India. The cost was too high, the resistance too strong. The movement had not achieved immediate independence, but it had made it clear that British rule in India was no longer tenable. The world was beginning to understand that the end of British rule was near. As the war ended in 1945, the British were left weakened and exhausted. The demand for Indian independence grew louder and could no longer be ignored. The Quit India movement had laid the groundwork. It had shown the world that India was ready to be free. In 1947, after years of struggle, negotiations, and immense sacrifice, India finally achieved independence. The British left, and India stood as a free nation, ready to shape its own destiny. The journey had been long and hard, filled with pain, loss, and suffering. But the people of India had done it. They had won their freedom. The Quit India movement had played a crucial role in this victory. It had united the people of India like never before. It had shown them the power of nonviolence, and it had demonstrated to the world that freedom was a right worth fighting for. Gandhi, the man who had inspired a nation to rise up without violence, had shown the world a new way to fight oppression. His principles of truth, nonviolence, and love had triumphed over the might of an empire. The Quit India movement was not just a chapter in India's history. It was a testament to the power of the human spirit, to the belief that justice and freedom would always prevail. As the sun rose on August 15, 1947, and the Indian flag was hoisted for the first time, the people of India remembered the journey that had brought them to this moment. They remembered the sacrifices, the struggles, and the leaders who had guided them. And in that moment, they knew that the spirit of Gandhi and the Quit India movement would live on, forever, in the heart of a free India. Chapter 8. The Pain of Partition. Finally, after decades of struggle, sacrifice, and unwavering determination, the day had come. India won its independence. The year was 1947, and across the vast country, people celebrated with joy and pride. The air was filled with the sound of cheers, the skies lit up with fireworks, and the Indian flag waved high, symbolizing the triumph of a nation that had fought so long for its freedom. But amidst the celebrations, there was one man who did not join in the jubilation. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, Bapu, as he was lovingly called, was not at peace. For him, the victory was bittersweet, because India's independence had come with a terrible price. The country was to be divided, split into two nations, India and Pakistan. Partition. The very word brought a chill to Gandhi's heart. The decision to divide, the country along religious lines, India for Hindus and Pakistan for Muslims, was a painful one. Gandhi had always believed in unity, in the idea that Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, and people of all faiths could live together as brothers and sisters. He had fought for an India where everyone was equal, where differences in religion were respected, not feared. But as independence drew near, the tensions between Hindus and Muslims grew worse. There were fears, mistrust, and anger. Some leaders believed that partition was the only way to prevent further bloodshed, that creating separate nations would bring peace. But Gandhi, he saw it differently. He knew that dividing the country would not bring peace. It would only bring more pain, more suffering, more violence. As the news of partition spread, the country was thrown into chaos. Communities that had lived together for centuries were torn apart. Neighbors turned against each other. Violence erupted, with deadly clashes between Hindus and Muslims. Homes were burned, families were separated, and countless lives were lost. The land that had fought so bravely for freedom was now drenched in blood. Gandhi was heartbroken. He could not understand how his beloved India, the land of ahimsa, non-violence, could descend into such brutality. He had dedicated his life to the principles of peace, love, and truth. And now, as his dream of a free India was finally realized, it was overshadowed by hatred and violence. But Gandhi did not give up. He knew that he had to act, that he could not stand by while his people, his children, were tearing each other apart. So, he set out on a journey to bring peace, to heal the wounds of his divided nation. He walked from village to village, town to town, pleading with people to stop the violence. He spoke to Hindus and Muslims alike, reminding them of the bond they shared, of the common humanity that united them. Gandhi's words were filled with sorrow, but also with hope. "This is not the India we fought for," he would say. "This is not the India of our dreams. We must remember who we are. We must return to the path of non-violence, of love and understanding." But the wounds were deep, and the hatred ran strong. The violence continued, and Gandhi's heart grew heavier with each passing day. He saw the devastation that partition had brought. Families torn apart, children orphaned, communities destroyed. The pain was too much to bear. And yet, Gandhi did not falter. He continued his mission, even as the darkness around him grew. In his final effort to stop the violence, Gandhi began a fast unto death. He refused to eat until the fighting stopped, until the people laid down their weapons and embraced each other as brothers once more. His fast was an act of desperation, a final plea for peace. Gandhi's frail body grew weaker with each passing day, but his spirit remained unbroken. He was willing to give his life, if it meant saving the lives of others. The country watched in silence. The world held its breath. And slowly, the message began to sink in. The people saw the suffering of the man who had given them their freedom. They saw the pain in his eyes, the tears that he shed for his beloved India, and they began to realize that the violence was not the answer, that they were destroying the very nation they had fought so hard to create. Little by little, the violence began to subside. Hindus and Muslims started to come together, to listen to each other, to remember the bond they had once shared. Gandhi's fast brought a fragile peace, but it was peace nonetheless. The people knew that they could not let this great man die, that they could not let his sacrifice be in vain. Gandhi's fast ended, but the pain of partition did not. The wounds were deep, and they would take years, even generations, to heal. But Gandhi's message of nonviolence, of love and unity, continued to resonate. He had shown the world that even in the darkest times, even when it seemed that all hope was lost, the light of truth and peace could still shine through. But the story of Gandhi did not have a happy ending. On January 30th, 1948, just a few months after India's independence, Gandhi was assassinated. He was shot by a man who believed that Gandhi had betrayed the Hindus, that his message of peace was a weakness, not a strength. The man who had dedicated his life to nonviolence, to bringing people together, was taken from the world by an act of violence. India mourned. The world mourned. The man who had led India to freedom was gone, but his legacy lived on. Gandhi's death was a reminder of the cost of hatred, of the price of violence. But it was also a reminder of the power of one man, of the impact that one life dedicated to truth and peace could have on the world. Gandhi's vision for India, an India of unity, peace, and nonviolence, was not fully realized in his lifetime. The pain of partition left scars that would last for years to come. But Gandhi's message, his dream, did not die with him. It continued to inspire millions in India and around the world. Chapter 9. The Man of Simplicity. Throughout his life, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, known to the world as Mahatma Gandhi, lived in a way that reflected his deepest beliefs. He was a man of simplicity, a man who believed that true power did not come from wealth, status, or possessions, but from living a life of truth, humility, and service to others. Gandhi's simplicity was not just in his words, but in every aspect of his life. He wore a humble cloth called a dhoti, a simple piece of fabric wrapped around his waist, covering his legs. This was no ordinary choice of clothing. Gandhi wore the dhoti as a symbol of his solidarity with the poorest of the poor in India. While the British and the wealthy dressed in fine clothes, Gandhi chose the dhoti to show that he stood with the millions of Indians who could afford nothing more. But Gandhi's simplicity didn't stop with his clothing. He believed in the value of hard work and self-reliance. He spun his own yarn using a charkha, or spinning wheel, which became one of the most powerful symbols of the Indian independence movement. By spinning his own cloth, Gandhi rejected the expensive, imported British textiles and encouraged others to do the same. He wanted India to become self-sufficient, to rely on its own people, its own resources, and not on the British. Gandhi's life was one of constant discipline and self-restraint. He believed that simplicity was not just about having less, but about focusing on what truly mattered. He lived in a small ashram, a simple, communal living space, where he shared his life with others who were committed to the same values. The ashram was a place of peace, reflection, and hard work. There, Gandhi and his followers lived according to strict principles of nonviolence, truth, and humility. Life in the ashram was not easy. The people there worked hard, farming the land, spinning yarn, and taking care of the community. There was no luxury, no comfort, just the bare necessities. But Gandhi believed that this simple life was where true greatness could be found. By stripping away the distractions of wealth and power, one could focus on the deeper truths of life, on what it meant to be truly human. Gandhi's diet was another reflection of his simplicity. He believed in eating only what was necessary, no more, no less. He was a strict vegetarian, a choice rooted in his deep respect for all living beings. He often fasted, not just as a form of protest, but as a way to purify his body and soul, to connect more deeply with the struggles of his people. Through fasting, Gandhi demonstrated his belief that true strength came from within, from mastering one's desires and living a life of discipline. But Gandhi's simplicity was not just about how he lived, it was also about how he treated others. He believed that every person, no matter how poor or powerless, deserved respect and dignity. He practiced what he preached, treating everyone he met with kindness and humility, whether they were a wealthy leader or a poor farmer. Gandhi's respect for others was rooted in his belief in the principle of ahimsa, or nonviolence. For Gandhi, nonviolence was not just the absence of physical violence. It was a way of life. It meant treating others with love, compassion, and understanding, even when they were your enemies. Gandhi's simplicity and humility inspired millions. People saw in him a leader who was different, a leader who did not seek power for himself, but who was devoted to the service of others. His life was a testament to the idea that true greatness does not come from what you have, but from who you are. Gandhi showed that by living simply, by focusing on truth, love, and service, anyone could make a difference in the world. One of the most remarkable things about Gandhi was his ability to connect with people from all walks of life. Whether he was speaking to a gathering of peasants in a remote village or negotiating with powerful British officials, Gandhi's message was the same. One of simplicity, truth, and nonviolence. People were drawn to him, not because of his wealth or power, but because of his authenticity, his genuine care for others, his commitment to living a life that reflected his deepest values. Gandhi's simplicity also extended to his approach to leadership. He did not see himself as a ruler or a commander, but as a servant of the people. He believed that true leadership was about serving others, about helping them to achieve their own potential. Gandhi often said that he was just an ordinary man, but it was his ordinariness that made him extraordinary. By living a simple, humble life, Gandhi showed that anyone, no matter how small or insignificant they might feel, could make a difference. Gandhi's commitment to simplicity also had a profound impact on the Indian independence movement. His rejection of materialism and his focus on self-reliance helped to build a sense of national pride and unity among the Indian people. The spinning wheel, the dhoti, the ashram, all became powerful symbols of India's struggle for freedom. They were reminders that the fight for independence was not just about political power, but about reclaiming India's soul, about creating a nation that reflected the values of truth, nonviolence, and simplicity. In a world that often values wealth, power, and status above all else, Gandhi's life stands as a powerful reminder that true power comes from within. It comes from living a life of integrity, from being true to oneself, from serving others with humility and love. Gandhi's simplicity was not a weakness, but a strength that inspired millions to follow him on the path to freedom. Even today, many years after his death, Gandhi's example continues to inspire people around the world. His life shows that greatness does not come from what you own or how much power you wield, but from how you live, from the values you hold, and from the way you treat others. Gandhi's message is clear. True power comes from simplicity, from living a life of truth, and from serving others with love and compassion. Chapter 10. The Last Fast. In the final years of his life, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi continued his relentless pursuit of peace, even as his beloved country, India, was torn apart by violence. The nation had achieved independence, but the joy of freedom was overshadowed by the pain of partition. Hindus and Muslims, who had once lived side by side, were now divided by fear, hatred, and bloodshed. Gandhi, the man who had always preached love and nonviolence, could not bear to see the land he loved descend into chaos. Gandhi had spent his entire life fighting for justice, for unity, for the dignity of every human being. And now, in these final years, he faced his greatest challenge yet. The violence between Hindus and Muslims seemed unstoppable. Every day, new stories of brutality reached his ears, stories of neighbors turning against each other, of homes being burned, of lives being destroyed. Gandhi's heart ached for his people. He knew that this was not the India he had dreamed of. This was not the India he had given his life for. But Gandhi did not give up. He believed that even in the darkest times, there was hope, that the power of love and truth could still prevail. And so, he decided to take a stand, in the only way he knew how. He would fast, a fast unto death, if necessary, until the violence stopped. Gandhi believed that by fasting, he could awaken the conscience of the nation, that he could remind the people of the principles of nonviolence and love that had guided them to freedom. On January 13, 1948, Gandhi began what would be his last fast. His frail body, already weakened by years of hard living and previous fasts, grew weaker with each passing day. He refused to eat, taking only sips of water, as he prayed for peace. His followers, and indeed the entire nation, watched in fear and concern. They knew that Gandhi was old, that his body could not withstand much more. But they also knew that Gandhi was a man of his word, that he would not break his fast until the violence ended. As the days passed, Gandhi's condition worsened. He became thinner, weaker, but his spirit remained strong. He continued to speak to those who visited him, urging them to embrace peace, to reject hatred, to see each other as brothers and sisters, not as enemies. "We are all children of the same God," he would say, his voice soft but filled with conviction. "There is no Hindu, no Muslim, only human beings, only souls." Gandhi's fast had a profound impact on the nation. People who had been consumed by anger and revenge began to reflect on their actions. They saw the suffering of the man who had led them to freedom, and they began to realize the futility of their violence. Hindu and Muslim leaders, who had once been at each other's throats, began to come together, to talk of peace, to try to find a way to end the bloodshed. Slowly but surely, the violence began to subside. In the streets of Delhi, where Gandhi was fasting, Hindu and Muslim leaders pledged to work together, to protect each other's communities, to restore the peace that had been shattered. Across India, people prayed for Gandhi's health and for the healing of their nation. Gandhi's fast had touched something deep within the hearts of the people, reminding them of the values that had united them in their struggle for independence. But even as the violence began to diminish, Gandhi knew that his work was not finished. He believed that the real battle was not just in the streets, but within the hearts of the people. The hatred and fear that had fueled the violence were still there, lurking beneath the surface. Gandhi knew that unless these deeper issues were addressed, the peace would not last. Gandhi believed that the only way to truly conquer hate was with love, that the only way to replace fear was with courage. He urged the people to look within themselves, to confront their own prejudices, to find the strength to forgive. "The real battle," he said, "is not against each other, but against the darkness within ourselves." He spoke of the need for personal transformation, for each individual to become a beacon of peace and love in their own lives. Gandhi's words resonated with many, but he also knew that change would not come easily. The wounds of partition were deep, the scars of violence fresh. But Gandhi never lost faith. He believed that even the smallest acts of kindness, the smallest gestures of love, could make a difference. He encouraged people to reach out to their neighbors, to build bridges of understanding, to create communities where everyone was welcome, regardless of their religion or background. Gandhi's last fast ended on January 18, 1948, when Hindu and Muslim leaders, along with other community representatives, assured him that they would work to restore peace. Gandhi broke his fast with a sip of orange juice, but his health had been severely weakened. Yet, even in his weakened state, Gandhi continued to work tirelessly for peace. He spent his final days meeting with leaders, writing letters, and speaking to anyone who would listen, urging them to continue the work of healing and reconciliation. But on January 30th, 1948, just 12 days after ending his fast, Gandhi was assassinated. He was on his way to a prayer meeting in Delhi when a man approached him and fired 3 shots at close range. Gandhi fell to the ground, uttering his last words, "He Ram, O God." The man who had dedicated his life to nonviolence, to love, to peace, was taken from the world by an act of violence. India mourned the loss of its greatest leader, the man who had led them to freedom and who had given his life in the pursuit of peace. The world, too, mourned, recognizing the profound impact that Gandhi had had on the global stage. But even in his death, Gandhi's message lived on. His life had shown the world that true power comes not from violence, but from love, that the greatest victories are won not on the battlefield, but in the hearts of men and women. Gandhi's last fast was a final testament to his unwavering belief in non-violence, in the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. He had shown that even in the face of overwhelming darkness, it was possible to stand firm in the light of truth and peace. Gandhi's legacy is one of courage, compassion, and an unshakable commitment to the principles of nonviolence. And as long as there are people who remember his teachings, his spirit will continue to inspire, to guide, and to light the way for those who seek a better world. Chapter 11. The Final Sacrifice. On January 30th, 1948. A quiet evening in New Delhi. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, the father of the Indian nation, was preparing for his daily prayer meeting. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the garden where Gandhi often walked in reflection. He moved slowly, supported by 2 of his grandnieces. His frail body, weakened by years of fasting and struggle, was clothed in his usual simple dhoti. His face was serene, his thoughts focused on peace, on healing the wounds of a divided nation. As Gandhi approached the prayer ground, a small crowd gathered to see him, to hear his words of wisdom. Among them was a man, filled with anger, who believed that Gandhi's message of peace and reconciliation was a threat to his own beliefs. This man had decided that Gandhi's time had come to an end, that his voice must be silenced. Gandhi, unaware of the danger, raised his hands in a gesture of blessing, as he did every day, as a sign of peace. But in the next moment, 3 shots rang out. The world seemed to stop. Time stood still. Gandhi, the man who had dedicated his life to nonviolence, who had fought for justice with truth and love, had been shot. As Gandhi collapsed to the ground, his last words were whispered softly. "He Ram, O God." The man who had lived every moment in the service of others, who had stood up to the might of an empire with nothing but the strength of his spirit, was gone. The news spread like wildfire, across India, across the world. The father of the nation, the Mahatma, had been taken from the world by an act of violence. People were in shock, in disbelief. How could it be that the man who had preached peace, who had shown the world the power of nonviolence, had been taken away by a bullet? The sorrow was overwhelming, the grief profound. But even in the midst of this sorrow, something remarkable happened. As the world mourned the loss of Gandhi, people began to reflect on his life, on the lessons he had taught, on the legacy he had left behind. They remembered the small man with the big heart, who had worn a simple dhoti, who had spun his own yarn, who had walked among the poorest of the poor, speaking of love, truth, and nonviolence. They remembered how Gandhi had led India to independence, not with weapons or armies, but with the power of ahimsa, the power of nonviolence. They remembered how he had faced injustice with courage, how he had fought against oppression with nothing but his unwavering belief in the truth. Gandhi had shown the world that one person, armed only with truth, could indeed change the course of history. In the days and weeks following Gandhi's assassination, people from all walks of life, Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, and people of all faiths, came together to honor his memory. They gathered in cities and villages, in homes and in public squares, to pay their respects to the man who had given his life for the cause of peace. There were no boundaries in this grief, no divisions of religion or caste. Gandhi's death had united the nation in a way that even his life could not. In India, the air was filled with a sense of loss, but also with a renewed commitment to the principles Gandhi had lived by. His followers, those who had marched with him, who had fasted with him, who had stood by him in the darkest times, vowed to continue his work. They knew that Gandhi's message of nonviolence was more important than ever, that the path he had shown was the only way to achieve true peace and justice. But Gandhi's legacy did not stop at India's borders. The whole world mourned the loss of the Mahatma. Leaders from every corner of the globe spoke of the impact Gandhi had had on their own lives and on the course of history. Martin Luther King Jr., who would later lead the civil rights movement in the United States, was deeply inspired by Gandhi's teachings. He spoke of how Gandhi had shown him that love and nonviolence were the most powerful weapons against injustice. Nelson Mandela, who would go on to lead the struggle against apartheid in South Africa, also looked to Gandhi as a source of inspiration. He saw in Gandhi's life a model of how to fight against oppression without resorting to violence. How to stand firm in the face of adversity with dignity and courage. In every corner of the world, people who had never met Gandhi, who had never set foot in India, felt the loss as if it were their own. They had seen in Gandhi a hope for a better world, a world where peace, justice, and love could triumph over hatred, violence, and injustice. And now, even in his death, Gandhi's light continued to shine, guiding people everywhere on the path of nonviolence. As the days passed, the people of India prepared for Gandhi's final journey. His body was placed on a simple wooden cart, draped in the Indian flag and covered with flowers. Millions of people lined the streets as the cart made its way through the city of Delhi. They walked in silence, their heads bowed, their hearts heavy with grief. But even in this moment of profound loss, there was a sense of peace, a sense of reverence. The people knew that Gandhi's physical presence was gone, but his spirit, his teachings, would live on forever. They knew that Gandhi's sacrifice, his final act of giving his life for peace, had not been in vain. As Gandhi's body was laid to rest, the world paused to remember, to reflect, and to recommit to the ideals that he had lived and died for. Gandhi's life had been a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of truth, love, and nonviolence. His death, though tragic, only strengthened that message. And so, even as the world mourned, there was a deep understanding that Gandhi's legacy would endure. His teachings would continue to inspire, to guide, to challenge people to live lives of integrity, compassion, and nonviolence. Gandhi had shown that one person, with nothing but the truth, could indeed change the world. In the years that followed, Gandhi's message spread even further. His life became a symbol. His words, a rallying cry for those who sought justice and peace. Schools, streets, and parks were named in his honor. Statues of Gandhi were erected in cities around the world. But more importantly, his ideas took root in the hearts and minds of people everywhere. Gandhi's final sacrifice, his willingness to give his life for the cause of peace, become a powerful reminder that true strength lies not in violence, but in love, not in power, but in humility, not in hatred, but in understanding. And as long as people continued to follow the path that Gandhi had walked, as long as they continued to believe in the power of truth and nonviolence, his spirit would live on, lighting the way to a better, more just world. Chapter 11. The Final Sacrifice. On January 30th, 1948, the sun began to set over New Delhi, casting a soft, golden light over the city. It was the end of another day, a day like any other, or so it seemed. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, now 78 years old, was preparing for his evening prayer meeting. As he walked slowly toward the gathering, his heart was filled with the same hope that had driven him all his life. The hope for peace, for unity, for a world where love and nonviolence would prevail. Gandhi's figure was familiar to everyone. A small, frail man, dressed in a simple dhoti, with a shawl draped over his shoulders. His walking stick tapped gently on the ground as he moved forward, supported by two of his grandnieces. Despite his age and the toll that years of fasting and struggle had taken on his body, Gandhi's spirit remained unbroken. His mission was not yet complete. Even after India had gained independence, his work continued, as he sought to heal the wounds of partition and to bring harmony between Hindus and Muslims. As he approached the prayer ground, a small crowd gathered to see him, to hear his words of wisdom, to be in the presence of the Mahatma. Gandhi raised his hands in his customary greeting, his voice soft but filled with warmth as he spoke to those around him. It was a moment of calm, a moment of peace. But lurking in the shadows was something far more sinister. Among the crowd was a man who believed that Gandhi's message of peace was a betrayal, that his efforts to reconcile Hindus and Muslims were weakening the nation. This man's heart was filled with anger and hatred, emotions that Gandhi had spent his life trying to overcome. And in that moment, as Gandhi greeted his followers, the man stepped forward, raising a gun. 3 shots rang out, piercing the quiet evening air. The sound echoed through the garden, and in that instant, the world seemed to stop. Gandhi, the man who had dedicated his life to nonviolence, had been struck by the very violence he had always opposed. He fell to the ground, whispering his last words. "He ram!" Oh God! The news spread rapidly, across the city, across the country, across the world. The Mahatma, the great soul, was gone. People were stunned, unable to comprehend that the man who had led India to freedom with love and truth could be taken away so brutally. The world stood still, in shock and sorrow, as the realization sank in. Gandhi, the man who had become a symbol of peace, had been silenced, but his voice, his message, would live on. As the news of Gandhi's assassination spread, a wave of grief swept over India. People from all walks of life, rich and poor, Hindu and Muslim, young and old, came together to mourn the loss of their beloved leader. The streets of Delhi were filled with mourners, their heads bowed, their hearts heavy. In villages and cities across the country, people gathered in silence, lighting candles and offering prayers for the man who had given his life for their freedom. But even in the midst of this profound grief, there was something else. A deep sense of reverence for the life that Gandhi had lived, and for the principles he had upheld. People remembered how Gandhi had led them with nothing but the power of his conviction, how he had faced the might of the British Empire without ever raising a hand in anger. They remembered how he had walked among them, barefoot and humble, speaking of truth, nonviolence, and love. Gandhi's legacy was not just in the freedom that India had won, but in the way that freedom had been achieved. He had shown the world that one man, armed only with the truth, could indeed change the course of history. He had proven that nonviolence was not just a dream, but a powerful force for justice. And even in death, Gandhi's message continued to resonate, inspiring millions to follow the path of peace. The day after Gandhi's assassination, his body was placed on a simple wooden bier, draped in the Indian flag and covered with flowers. His final journey through the streets of Delhi was a somber, dignified procession. Millions of people lined the roads, standing in silence, as the man they had called Bapu, Father, was carried to his final resting place. There were no divisions on this day, no Hindus or Muslims, no rich or poor, only a united nation, mourning the loss of the man who had brought them together. As Gandhi's body was laid to rest, the world paused to remember, to reflect on the lessons he had taught, to honor the life he had lived. Leaders from around the globe sent messages of condolence, recognizing the profound impact that Gandhi had had on the world. They spoke of how his teachings had influenced their own struggles for justice, of how his example had shown them that love and truth could triumph over hatred and violence. But perhaps the most powerful tribute came from the ordinary people of India. Those who had walked with Gandhi, who had listened to his words, who had been inspired by his example. They knew that Gandhi's death was not the end, that his spirit would live on in their hearts, in their actions, in the way they chose to live their lives. In the days and weeks that followed, there was a renewed commitment to the principles that Gandhi had stood for. People vowed to continue his work, to strive for the peace and unity that he had dedicated his life to. They knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that the wounds of partition would take time to heal. But they also knew that Gandhi's teachings had given them the tools they needed to build a better future. Around the world, Gandhi's legacy continued to grow. His life became a beacon of hope for those who were struggling against oppression and injustice. His words were quoted by leaders, activists, and ordinary people alike, reminding them that true power comes not from violence, but from love. That lasting change can only be achieved through truth and nonviolence. Statues of Gandhi were erected in cities across the globe. His image became a symbol of peace and justice. His teachings were studied in schools and universities. But more than anything, his life became a source of inspiration, a reminder that one person, no matter how small or humble, could make a difference. In the years that followed, the world would face many challenges, but the example of Gandhi would continue to shine as a guiding light. His final sacrifice, his willingness to give his life for the cause of peace, would be remembered as a testament to the power of the human spirit. And as long as people continued to believe in the principles of nonviolence, truth, and love, Gandhi's legacy would endure, lighting the way to a more just and peaceful world. The world had lost a great soul, but Gandhi's message lived on, stronger than ever. It was a message that transcended borders, cultures, and religions, a message that spoke to the very heart of what it means to be human. And in the end, it was this message that would stand the test of time, reminding us all that even in the face of darkness, there is always light, and that the path to true greatness is paved not with power, but with love. Chapter 12. The Eternal Light. Today, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi is remembered as the father of the nation in India. His life, his principles, and his unwavering commitment to nonviolence have left an indelible mark on the world. Though he left this earth many years ago, his teachings continue to inspire millions across the globe. Gandhi's legacy lives on, not just in history books, but in the hearts of those who seek justice, peace, and truth. Everywhere in India, reminders of Gandhi can be seen. Schools, streets, and parks are named in his honor. Statues stand tall, depicting the humble man with a walking stick and simple clothing, a symbol of strength born from simplicity. But these physical reminders are only a part of his legacy. The true tribute to Gandhi lies in our actions, in the choices we make every day. Gandhi taught us that peace is not just the absence of war, but a way of life. It's the choice to resolve conflicts with dialogue, not with fists or weapons. It's the decision to treat others with respect, even when they disagree with us. Whenever we choose peace over violence, we honor Gandhi's memory. We keep his light shining in a world that often struggles with darkness. Truth was at the very core of Gandhi's philosophy. He believed that truth was the most powerful force in the world, stronger than any army, more enduring than any empire. Gandhi called this force satyagraha, the force of truth. He showed us that living in truth means being honest with ourselves